This podcast contains adult themes and graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
A commercial-free version of this podcast is available on Patreon for $1 per month. Patreon.com/Beyond Contempt Podcast. I'm Renee, and this is Beyond Contempt True Crime. Hunting season is upon us. In episode 53, I covered the case of Cha Vang, the Hmong hunter who killed several white hunters in northern Wisconsin. These murders turned up the tension in the state, despite both cultures sharing a long tradition of enjoying hunting. A few years later, there was another major incident in northern Wisconsin where a white hunter killed a Hmong hunter and tried to claim self-defense. I'm covering that case today. You're listening to episode 69, Cha Vang. Four friends went hunting for small game in the Peshtigo Harbor Wildlife Area in northeast Wisconsin on Friday, January 5th, 2007. Peshtigo is well north of Green Bay and is a stone's throw from Marinette by the Wisconsin-Michigan border. Everyone went their separate ways and agreed they would meet back at their vehicle at sunset. Paumua was worried since their friend had not returned and at first thought he was lost. Panic set in, and Paumua called 911 at 6:30 p.m. The search started around 8 p.m. that night. Local search crews aided law enforcement, but at 1:30 a.m., the hunter still wasn't found. That same Friday evening, 28-year-old James Nichols and his fiancée, Darcia James, walked into the Bay Area Medical Center in Marinette, Wisconsin. James had been shot in both hands. The emergency staff immediately called law enforcement because they had a legal obligation to report the injuries. At 7 p.m., Deputy Jason Duquesne showed up at the medical center to interview the patient who sustained the gunshot wounds in each hand. The deputy found James Nichols resting in a hospital bed. Nichols said at 4 p.m. he went squirrel hunting with a pellet gun in Athelstan, Wisconsin, when he was shot in the hand, but he didn't know who shot him or where the shots came from. Athelstan is northwest of Marinette, Wisconsin, and is approximately a 50-minute drive between the two locations. Nichols said he ran and was shot a second time in the finger on the other hand. He drove home and he called his fiancée, Darcia. She picked him up, and on the way to the hospital, they quickly stopped at her mother's house. Nichols randomly said he was not a fan of Michigan. When the deputy asked him to elaborate, he said it would have been closer for him to go to a hospital in Michigan, but he went to Marinette instead. Nichols said the pellet gun was in his fiancée's car in the hospital parking lot. The deputy asked why he brought the weapon to the hospital, and Nichols said it was his baby. He also thought police would want to see the gun. The deputy inquired about Nichols' criminal history, and that was when Nichols admitted he was on parole after serving time for a burglary conviction. The deputy wasn't entirely buying this story. Nichols did not yell out to warn the shooter that he was there and didn't call the police. He also brought up Michigan without prompting. The deputy told Nichols that some elements of his story seemed unusual, and that he would be in trouble with his probation officer if he wasn't being truthful. The deputy stepped out of the hospital room to allow Nichols to reconsider his story. When the deputy returned, Nichols asked him about theoretical self-defense cases and what happened to individuals involved in those kinds of shootings. The deputy thought about the missing hunter in the Peshtigo Harbor Wildlife Area and asked Nichols if he had been there. Was there another person they should search for? Nichols said it was one of his go-to spots for hunting. The deputy stepped out of the room again, and when he returned, Nichols wanted to continue the theoretical discussion of self-defense. The deputy again asked him if they should look for another person. This time Nichols said there was another person, and he was dead. They would find him in the Peshtigo Harbor area, close to Hipkey Road. Nichols then rapidly spit out a disjointed account that involved him telling a Hmong hunter to leave. The other hunter spoke quote-unquote gibberish and shot him. Nichols charged the hunter and was shot again. He was in a physical scrap with the hunter before a third shot could be fired at him. Nichols said he was being choked, and the other hunter tried to rip out his eye, but Nichols got the best of him. During this account, Nichols referred to the Hmong group as bad. The deputy noted Nichols did not have any injuries to his eyes or neck. He had some minor scratches on his face and under his chin. Detective Anthony O'Neill arrived at the hospital, and now it was his turn to interview James Nichols. He reminded Nichols that he was not under arrest, and his participation in answering questions was voluntary. The detective asked Darcia James to leave the room because he wanted to speak with Nichols one-on-one. The detective asked Nichols to explain the incident. Nichols said that Hmong are mean because they kill everything. He admitted he was hunting with a shotgun and not a pellet gun. Nichols had treed a squirrel and noticed a Hmong hunter watching him. He told the hunter to leave. Then that hunter shot Nichols in the right hand with a .22 caliber rifle from 50 feet away. Nichols claimed the other man shouted, "I'm going to kill you! I'm going to kill you!" Nichols ran and took cover behind a tree, which moved him another 40 feet away from the other hunter. He fired off a wild shot towards the Hmong hunter, but didn't know if it hit him. Nichols was shot in the hand, and the other hunter had issues with his gun, so Nichols charged him. Nichols grabbed the man's gun and tossed it 20 feet away, then stabbed him twice in the neck. The detective read James Nichols his Miranda rights, which ended the interview, because he asked for an attorney. The detective did not ask Nichols any more questions, but told him he could help police find the body of the other hunter. Nichols agreed to help and acknowledged he was aware he did not have to help the police. Detective O'Neill drove James Nichols out to Peshtigo Harbor Wildlife Area, and they walked the trail where he thought he left the dead hunter. Nichols revealed he had dragged the man into a low area where he covered his body with leaves and a log. It was dark, and they could not find the body, so police called off the search until morning. They took James Nichols into custody, and the jail staff escorted him to Appleton, Wisconsin, because he needed hand surgery. The next morning at 8:12 a.m., police found 30-year-old Cha Vang's body, which was covered with leaves and a log, just as Nichols had described. Vang's rifle was found under a piece of bark. There was one fired cartridge in the chamber, and the magazine was hiding in a pile of leaves. An autopsy showed that Cha Vang was shot and the shotgun pellets hit his face, neck, shoulder, right arm, upper chest, and right side of his upper back. The pellets damaged the carotid artery. He had a stab wound on his face and 5 stab wounds on his neck, which severed the interior and exterior jugular veins. They ruled the death a homicide. James Nichols had a past and served time in prison for burglary. Investigators held Nichols in jail on a probation violation, since he was a felon with a shotgun. They could hold him for 11 days while they considered what to charge him with. On Sunday, January 7th, 2007, many people gathered at the Vang's duplex on the east side of Green Bay to mourn the loss of their family member and friend. They made food while children folded joss paper, which was a Hmong custom, and the belief was that the paper money followed the deceased soul into the afterlife. Cha Vang's wife, Pang Vu, was 25 years old, and they were married for 11 years. Their 5 children ranged in age from 3 to 11. The family came to the United States 2 years prior because they wanted a better life for their kids. Vang was born in Laos and fled to a refugee camp in Thailand, where he lived for 10 years. Pang Vu felt like they were at the beginning of their dream life, which was full of opportunities, but that dream life was now splintered. The president of the United Hmong Community Center said that Cha Vang learned how to hunt and just started taking classes to learn the English language. Vang hoped to find a job soon. The president didn't believe that Vang provoked a confrontation, since he didn't really speak English. Cha Vang's brother, Yi Van, who lived in Minnesota, wasn't shocked. They all arrived in this country with nothing, and now he lost his brother. Some folks in the Hmong community were worried that this incident was retaliation, and others were reserving judgment. The DNR didn't track the racial demographics of hunters, but many noticed that there were fewer Hmong hunters who told them that they were concerned about racism, especially after the Cha Vang shooting of several Wisconsin hunters in 2004. Plus, the amount of private land, which was open for public hunting, was diminishing. Some hunters felt territorial over the public land that they hunted on for years. All of these circumstances led to more confusion and confrontations in the northern Wisconsin woods. Police were very careful how they handled Cha Vang's death. They wanted to use caution and contemplate all the facts. This case was another emotional powder keg, since tensions were still high from 2004. They provided little information to the public, including if the death was accidental or if it was a hate crime. Police wouldn't even say what weapons were involved. The Attorney General wanted details held from the public until he thoroughly reviewed the case. The only information released was that both men were hunting game, they both had weapons, and the meeting was accidental. Cha Vang was wearing hunting camouflage and didn't have any known medical issues. They released the 911 call, which reported that he was missing. Peshtigo is a small city in Wisconsin with only 3,500 people. This news was the talk of the small town. James Nichols lived in an apartment above a restaurant called King of Clubs Grill. The owner of the restaurant said Nichols was a polite and pleasant man who treated the servers well and was always ready to lend a helping hand. The owner didn't know him well, but said she couldn't picture him hurting anyone, and that he didn't have a mean bone in his body. Nichols was a bit of a loner and didn't have many other people over to his apartment. He was hardworking. He liked to hunt and fish. He would sometimes cut grass in the summer and was a former sawmill worker. James Nichols' 20-year-old fiancée, Darcia James, spoke with the media. She said that Nichols asked Vang to leave the area where he was squirrel hunting. Darcia had known Nichols for 5 years and said he was not a racist. Jim didn't intend to do this. He wasn't going out hunting for people. He was defending himself. Jim is not a racist at all. He has friends from every ethnic background he has ever come in contact with. Nichols had a criminal past and committed a burglary in 1996 when he was 18 years old. He and a 15-year-old friend broke into 7 rural cabins. The pair were looking for cash. They took what they wanted and vandalized the cabins by plugging the sinks and turning on the faucets. The letters KKK and a racial slur were spray painted on a bedroom door and on a kitchen counter. Both men denied spray painting the racist remarks. Nichols was convicted and sent to prison in 1997 on 3 counts of burglary and 1 count of criminal damage to property. He was released in 2002 and was placed on parole supervision. During this time, many opinion pieces were being written in the Green Bay Press-Gazette. The first of several op-eds wrote about understanding the need for the Attorney General's office in Madison, Wisconsin to review the case before they released details to the public. This case brought back memories of the 2004 Cha Vang case, and initial reports in Cha Vang's case raised the potential for this being a hate crime. Northeastern Wisconsin was waiting for information that could ease tensions in the Hmong community. The opinion piece concluded that the community would wait, but the grace period was running out. The community was becoming restless because James Nichols was being held but had not been formally charged with any crimes. As a side note, Cha Vang and Cha Vang were not relatives. Vang is a common name in the Hmong community. Hugh Lee, a Laotian immigrant who lived in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, said the murder of Cha Vang had him questioning his engagement with the sport of hunting. He experienced uncomfortable situations in the past, and if there was another incident, Hugh Lee was going to quit hunting because it wasn't worth the risk. Bill Vang, an attorney in Green Bay, explained that confrontations happened between Hmong and White hunters because of the language barrier. and a lack of understanding that both cultures share a common heritage of hunting. On January 11, 2007, they held a candlelight vigil in Green Bay to remember Cha Vang. Both Hmong and non-Hmong members of the community attended. Many held tea lights inside of plastic cups, as well as tiny plastic peace doves. Both family and leaders in the Hmong community spoke about coming together during tough times, being patient with law enforcement. The two oldest Vang children understood their father was dead, while the three younger children were still waiting for their dad to come home after hunting. The children held up a sign that read, "Dad, I love you." Cha Vang's traditional Hmong funeral would be held in St. Paul, Minnesota, which was home to his brother. On Sunday, January 14th, approximately 300 members of the Hmong community gathered for a town hall-style meeting at the Best Western Hotel in Ashwaubenon, Wisconsin, right next to Green Bay. Many people needed to talk about their frustration over the Cha Vang case, and they were upset with the lack of action from law enforcement. When a member of the panel asked the community if they felt Cha Vang's death was racially motivated, almost everyone in the room raised their hand. There were many concerns, including wanting justice for Cha Vang's family, which would restore the Hmong community's trust with local authorities and the criminal justice system. They wanted the investigation to examine the racial aspects of the crime, with full prosecution of the hate crime statutes. The community wanted the full autopsy report released to the public, and all the facts in the investigation completely disclosed, including where Vang's body was found, how he was killed, details of James Nichols' injuries, and any conversations he had with medical staff. They also wanted an explanation of why James Nichols wasn't charged swiftly. It felt like a double standard, given that they charged Chai Suo-Vang quickly after he killed the White Hunters in 2004. A spokesperson for the town hall wanted to clarify that the meeting was not meant to be anti-law enforcement, anti-media, or anti-non-Hmong community. They were using the town hall to communicate and to diffuse tension. Dick Campbell was the media liaison for the Vang family. He said, "People are asking if it's a hate crime. I'm asking that too. But law enforcement has been extremely cooperative and sensitive to the family's needs." I think many of my listeners are similar to me. You like mysteries and true crime, especially in podcast form. That's why I love the new podcast, A Study of Strange. The show dives deep into the most fascinating tales of the unknown, including true crime and stories of high strangeness. A Study of Strange is hosted by Michael May, the filmmaker and host behind the mystery true crime TV shows on Motor Trend TV, Autobiography, and Autobiography Cold Cases. You can tell Michael's obsessed with these stories, and he really gets into the research. Each week, Michael invites a guest onto the show to help him debunk misconceptions, discover new theories, and they also act out reactions. Recent episodes include a bizarre unsolved murder in New Hampshire, which might have been committed by German spies in 1917. And another one is an interview with a man who claims he knows Usha Biggie Smalls. I think you're really going to enjoy this podcast, so definitely check out A Study of Strange. Find A Study of Strange at www.astudyofstrange.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Another op-ed in the Green Bay Press-Gazette asked to not rush the case and to trust in the justice system. There were over 100 messages left on the Green Bay Press-Gazette's website, some of which were published in the paper. It was apparent that the community held a variety of strong opinions on the case. Cranked Up said, "I have had an experience with Hmongs hunting up around Athelstane a few years back, and they can be pretty persuasive when they are in a group with loaded firearms, and I was on private property. The DNR needs to take a close look at whom they are selling a license to, instead of looking at the dollar figure only." X007 Hunter X wrote, "As much hatred as this man has, I really don't care if he gets off easy or spends the rest of his life in prison. He'll spend a lifetime thinking about Mr. Vang, and the one thing that he hates most will eventually consume him. Powder said, 2 years ago when Cha Vang killed 6 white hunters, all you white people made a big fuss about it, and us Hmong let you guys make a big fuss about it because we didn't know what happened, so we waited to see what was going to happen. Now James Nichols kills a Hmong hunter, and when we make a big fuss about it, you're going to complain about us. How come every time one of you guys die or is the center of attention, you claim that your person was such a loving, caring person that won't harm a person and was loved by everyone? Same goes for Cha Vang. And you don't see me saying that now, do you? GBU wrote, now let's set the process for a fair and balanced trial for this case. I think we all want closure so that the healing process can take place and build trust and mutual respect within our community and state again. 11 days after the incident, on January 16, 2007, which was the last day law enforcement could legally hold James Nichols, they formally charged him with first-degree intentional homicide, concealing a corpse, and a felon possessing a firearm. There were no hate crime charges filed. The hearing lasted 9 minutes, and James Nichols' bond was set at $500,000. They released the 14-page criminal complaint to the public. Nichols and Vang were both licensed hunters that didn't know each other prior to the incident. Cha Vang had been shot and stabbed 6 times. Investigators only had James Nichols' account of what happened, as well as some additional information law enforcement collected. During Nichols' interview at the hospital, he mentioned Michigan. He brought the state up because he drove there before he went to the hospital. After Nichols killed Vang, he drove home to Peshtigo and called his fiancée. She went to his apartment and tried to clean and bandage his hands. Darcia James drove Nichols to a storage locker in Menominee, Michigan, where he exchanged his shotgun for a pellet gun. They stopped at Darcia's mother's home before they went to the hospital. Nichols told Darcia's mother that a Hmong hunter shot him twice, and he retaliated and killed the man. Investigators went to the Michigan storage locker and retrieved the 12-gauge shotgun and ammunition. They also found a .22 caliber bolt-action rifle and ammo. There were spots of blood on the concrete floor, inside and outside of the locker. Law enforcement also found the blood-stained knife in the center console of Darcia James' car. She had removed it from Nichols' pocket before they went into the emergency room. Darcia said she didn't really consider that she was helping Nichols hide evidence. She said Nichols was scared because he was on parole and wasn't supposed to have a firearm. Darcia said he gave different versions of events out of fear because he was so terrified over the whole situation. On March 16th, the defense filed a request and asked for a different judge. A new judge was granted, but the reason for the change was not publicized. On March 19th, James Nichols pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. The prosecution opted to not file a hate crime enhancer. It was considered, but ultimately they did not pursue it as part of their strategy. The Vang family understood the strategy and were aware that they could still file hate crime charges up to the time of the trial. Because the case was so notable, all the motions that were filed leading up to the trial were sealed until the judge determined their admissibility. They did this to ensure the defendant received a fair trial. At one of the pretrial motions, the Vang family felt James Nichols lacked remorse and was very cavalier in the courtroom. A spokesperson for the Vang family said he was enjoying his 15 minutes of fame. When James Nichols gave his initial interviews in the emergency room, his defense team wanted those conversations thrown out, since they had not read him his Miranda rights. Because James Nichols was previously convicted of burglary, the judge decided he knew what he was getting into by answering police questions, and the interviews could be used in court. 29-year-old James Nichols' trial began on October 1st, 2007 with jury selection. The lawyers whittled down the jury pool from 150 people to 8 men and 6 women. The entire jury was white, since they held the trial in Marinette, Wisconsin. There was potential prejudice against Cha Vang because he was an immigrant who spoke little to no English, and a potential prejudice against Nichols for being a former convicted felon. This case hinged upon a few things: actions that led up to the shooting, attitudes about race, and the legitimacy of Nichols' belief that he was in danger. The defense would not deny that Nichols committed the killing, but he did so in self-defense. The prosecution's argument was Nichols had a prejudice against Hmong hunters, and he acted on it because he had the opportunity to, being deep in the woods. James Nichols did not testify in his own defense. On October 2nd, the court saw graphic video and photo evidence of the victim's body, which was very difficult for everyone, including the Vang family who were in the courtroom. Cha Vang's widow, Pang Vu, took the stand and explained that she met her husband in Thailand. They were political refugees and were allowed to immigrate to the United States in August 2004. She told the courtroom that Cha Vang was a thoughtful man and a patient person. When the defense lawyer cross-examined Pang Vu, he questioned Vang's service in the military. Per a sheriff's report, it stated that he had served in the Thailand military for 3 years. When asked, she initially told investigators that Vang didn't serve in the military, then later clarified that she didn't remember what she told them because of grief after learning about her husband's death. Cha Vang's hunting partner, Pa Mua, took the stand and recounted their hunting trip. When Cha Vang did not meet the hunting party at the car at sunset, he called out for his friend and even fired a few shots into the air. Pa Mua said that Cha Vang was a good man who never yelled at his wife or children. The director of the state crime lab in Wausau explained that there was a spent cartridge case in the chamber of Vang's .22 caliber rifle. This refuted Nichols' account that he shot twice. He could not confirm where Vang or Nichols were positioned at the time of the shooting. A nurse from the emergency room testified that she overheard Nichols tell his fiancée, "I suppose no one would believe me if I said it was self-defense." One of the female jurors was sick and had to be sent home, which only left one alternate juror. On October 3rd, John Spalding of JS Forest Products testified. He was James Nichols' boss, and at the beginning of the workday, Nichols told him he encountered a male Hmong hunter in the middle of nowhere in the northern Wisconsin woods. Nichols said he wished he could have killed him. Spalding asked him why he felt this way, and Nichols said he hated them little fuckers. Nichols seemed serious, and John Spalding felt the look in his eye was that of hatred. A Wisconsin landowner took the stand and explained that he briefly met James Nichols. Nichols said that his tree stand was stolen from the public hunting land, and he was adamant that someone Hmong had taken it. The landowner offered Nichols a cell phone to call the sheriff's office, but Nichols declined. He explained he had an unpleasant experience with the sheriff's department. The prosecution called Cha Vang's English as a second language teacher to the stand. The instructor taught at Northeast Wisconsin Technical College in Green Bay. Vang had learned a little English and could only communicate basic things like his address or simple greetings. This refuted Nichols' claim that Vang said he was going to kill him. The medical examiner explained that Cha Vang's right arm was in the front of his body when he was hit by the pellets from the shotgun. There were even shotgun pellets inside of Vang's mouth. There was a laceration from blunt force trauma behind his right ear. He had 5 gashes on his neck with a severed jugular vein, which was caused by a knife or sharp object. A 3 to 4 inch stick had entered Vang's mouth with so much force that his tongue had been ripped open. The medical examiner thought that Nichols could have picked up a stick and used it like a knife during their struggle. Or it might have resulted from a fall during the struggle, and the stick accidentally entered his mouth. The medical examiner ultimately could not determine the sequence of Cha Vang's injuries. A firearms expert testified that Nichols was 27 to 36 feet away when he shot Vang. Next, the emergency room doctor who treated James Nichols' wounds said the injuries on his left hand could have been caused by a knife and not a gunshot. The wound on his right hand was definitely from a gunshot, It had destroyed the knuckle on his ring finger, and his pinky finger was amputated. The bullet fragments were visible on an X-ray of the right hand. On October 4th, 2007, the prosecution picked apart Nichols' interviews, which had been recorded. The last time I went out there was a lot of Hmongs out there hunting. And now I can't do it, you know? They're mean. They kill everything. I mean, they don't care what it is. Me, I'm more for specifics. They're going to anything that moves. Nichols said he had a squirrel treed when he sensed a person was behind him. It was another hunter, and Nichols told him to hunt elsewhere. Nichols said Vang shot him and struck him in the right hand. Nichols claimed Vang said, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you." Nichols said he fired one shot, was shot in the left hand, charged the hunter, grabbed his gun, and tossed it. He wrestled the man to the ground and stabbed him in the neck. Nichols didn't know what to do, so he covered the dead hunter up because he was scared. The defense team called 2 witnesses who were former co-workers of Nichols, and they testified he was not racist towards Hmong people. Nichols' fiancée, Darcia, testified that Nichols was not racist towards Hmong people or anyone else. Her parents both testified to the same thing. The ex-wife of John Spalding took the stand. Her ex had previously testified about Nichols' racism towards Hmong hunters. The defense team asked her if her husband was truthful. She said she didn't find his testimony to be truthful at all. During cross-examination, the prosecution asked her about their divorce and wanted to know how contentious it was. She was honest and said the divorce had been bad. Next, the defense had a criminologist explain how the gunfight could turn into a wrestling match. A corrections officer who had taken Nichols to the hand surgeon testified and said Nichols asked her if she heard about the Hmong hunter who shot the white hunters, referring to the Chai Su Vang incident in 2004. The hand surgeon took the stand and said the wounds on both of Nichols' hands were caused by gunshots, which refuted the ER doctor's testimony, claiming that his left hand injury was caused by a knife, implying they were lesser wounds or were perhaps self-inflicted. The hand surgeon said once he prepped Nichols for surgery and cleaned the wound, he could see the irregular edges of the injury, which meant a knife did not cause it. A detective testified that Vang's bullet could have grazed Nichols' left hand and then embedded in his right hand as he held a shotgun, which suggested Nichols might have already aimed his weapon at Vang. This would have refuted Nichols' claim that he was fired at unprovoked. In the closing argument, the prosecutor emphasized to jurors that James Nichols was deep in the isolation of the woods, which gave him the opportunity to act on his prejudice towards Hmong people. The prosecutor stated that Vang acted in self-defense and not the other way around. On October 5, 2007, the jury deliberated for 5 hours, and the arguments were so intense that it devolved into yelling. They were split 9-3, with 9 people believing that Nichols was guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. One juror was adamant about the first-degree charge. They didn't think Nichols thought his life was in jeopardy, and even believed he started the attack. The jury member was confident that Vang shot Nichols in self-defense. This juror believed that Nichols hated Hmong people, and that was how the minor dispute erupted into murder. 3 jurors were holdouts and refused to budge, so a compromise was made, and they settled on a lesser charge. James Nichols was guilty of second-degree intentional homicide, hiding a corpse, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. The second-degree charge allowed the jurors to consider that Nichols thought he was acting in self-defense, but the force he used was unreasonable. The difference in first-degree and second-degree intentional homicide amounted to a mandatory life versus a 60-year sentence. Additional charges of hiding a corpse and a felon possessing a firearm potentially carried an additional 20 years. Tears rolled down James Nichols' face as the verdict was read, while Peng Vu initially had very little reaction. She collapsed when she left the courtroom, and security had to carry her out of the building. They took her to a local hospital via an ambulance. A family member confirmed she fainted and they expected she would be okay. Pang Vu had a lot on her plate with 5 kids. She eventually received rent assistance and was part of a W-2 program, which provided employment preparation services. Cha Vang's family was upset by the verdict. They felt that the second-degree charge was a slap in the face. Vang's older brother said, "In my native country, if you are guilty, you are guilty. There is no first or second degree." The prosecution thought the verdict was a success, but was sympathetic to the Vang family's feelings. The defense attorney was unhappy with the verdict. They believed they had a solid self-defense case, and the jury should have acquitted James Nichols. A spokesperson for the Coalition for Community Relations in St. Paul, Minnesota said, "The message sent to the Hmong community is that someone can shoot a Hmong hunter and not get the maximum sentence. What we found today was more division and broken bridges between our communities." On November 28, 2007, the judge sentenced James Nichols to a maximum of 69 years in prison and 30 years of extended supervision. Judge David Mirren said, "I think the community needs as much protection from you as we can possibly get, because I think you do have violent tendencies, and I think this will continue. The best we can do is make sure you never, ever have a chance to do harm to anyone again." The judge also awarded the Vang family 25% of Nichols' prison wages, which was the maximum amount allowed. He earned 27 cents per hour, so the Vangs would receive $140 per year. However, they would not receive money for 3 more years, since Nichols still owed restitution for his previous conviction. From age 32 to 65, Nichols would pay the Vangs $4,492.80. From age 65 to 79, he would owe them another $338, since Nichols would earn the prison minimum of 5 cents per hour for that age range. Nichols took the opportunity to speak. "I want to give my condolences to the Vang family. I'm sorry for what happened. We all share in your sympathy here, no more than me myself." The Vang family was not happy with the second-degree conviction, but were pleased that James Nichols received the maximum prison sentence. Nichols appealed his conviction in April 2009. His lawyer argued that his boss's testimony about his racist attitudes and the landowner's testimony about the tree stand impacted Nichols' right to a fair trial. The court disagreed, and they upheld his conviction. On December 25, 2008, 22-year-old Darcia James was charged with 2 felonies of aiding a felon and being a party to possessing a firearm by a felon, and a misdemeanor of encouraging a violation of parole. In June 2009, Darcia took a plea deal and pleaded no contest to all counts. In August, she received 6 months in jail, 3 years of probation, and 200 hours of community service. This case prompted lawmakers to push for Hmong history to be taught in schools. School boards would be required to create programs which would teach students about the trajectory of the Hmong people, especially their role in the Vietnam War with secretly aiding CIA operations, and subsequently being granted asylum in the U.S. after the communists attempted genocide. Lawmakers felt that a better understanding would bring about tolerance and respect for the Hmong people and their culture. This bill never made it to the Senate floor. Someone proposed an expanded form of the bill in 2021. It is still a work in progress. A Wapaka man took it upon himself to produce signs that said "no trespassing" in English and Hmong languages, so hunters could be alerted to land that was closed to public hunting. They priced the signs at $4 each. The president of the United Hmong and Asian American Community Center in Green Bay thought the bilingual signs were a great idea. The director of the DNR agreed and suggested that Spanish be added to the signs as well. 15 months after Cha Vang's death, the Hmong Sportsman's Club in Green Bay offered a program that taught Hmong hunters and anglers about the Wisconsin outdoors. It gave their community a place to connect and allowed them to share culture and outdoor traditions to help reduce community tensions. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Beyond Contempt. Please visit beyondcontemptpodcast.com for the links to the sources and music used in this episode. Research, writing, editing, audio production, and sound design were performed by me, Renee. If you like the show, please leave me a positive review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thank you so much, everyone.